nervous because I'm here now.
Hey guys, welcome into another episode of 410 Sports Talk. James Haskell, along with my co-host Glenn Martin, and the time is here. Ladies and gentlemen, we know you've been waiting all week for our preview show. That's right, just Glenn and I here chatting it up about the Bills-Ravens game. Really excited to break it down. If you've been with us for a while, you know how these preview shows go. So we'll get into some offensive and defensive stuff, talk about health and things like that. But if you're new to the channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Take a second to turn on your notifications so you stay up to date. And then, of course, give us a like. Leave us your comments in the section below regarding the game and all the things we talk about and our challenge that we'll talk about here shortly. Mm-hmm. But let's get into this game right off the jump. Of course, it's a divisional matchup against the Buffalo Bills. The Ravens are going up to Buffalo to hopefully come out with a W. And Glenn, I'm going to start off here with some health to provide, us and then the rest of the Ravens flock with some context here. And I'm going to start with our guys. The nice thing, Glenn, is that we're getting healthy at the right time. I feel like every week we continue to get healthier and healthier. So the only guy that right now, as of today, Thursday, that did not practice, and it's not injury related, is Derek Wolfe getting a vet day off, a well-deserved vet day off. We did have a couple guys that were limited in practice. That's DJ Fluker and Marcus Peters. Marcus he's got a back, and DJ, of course, has been dealing with that knee. And then Matt Judon, who we were a little concerned about because he had an illness on Monday and missed practice had an illness and then missed practice Tuesday, Wednesday. But today wasn't even limited. He was full participant, full go. So it's not, I guess it couldn't be COVID because he already had COVID. So I'm sure he's got a couple months of solid.
I don't know. I'm no expert.
Right. That's true. I probably shouldn't speak about it. But so we're healthy. That list is short. But for them, they're a little more banged up. And I think in some key areas. First of all, talking about their passing attack, their pass catchers. Cole Beasley has been limited all week with a knee and he's got an ankle. Stephon Diggs is dealing with an oblique. He was a full participant today, but he was limited throughout the week. Tremont Edmonds is a guy that's been dealing with a hamstring, limited most of the week, full participant today, but he's going to be a big part of that defense. But the other three names that I want to focus on here are three defensive linemen, an end and two tackles. Daryl Johnson hasn't practiced because of a knee all week. Ed Oliver was limited due to an ankle. He's a full participant today, but he's obviously banged up. And Justin Zimmer has a groin that he's dealing with as well. So that's a concern for them because they're already not a great running. They're not great against defending the run. But to have those guys banged up, even on top of that, I think it makes that proposition even more difficult. But as far as health goes, I think we're looking good. I think both teams overall will be able to field their healthiest guys. So what about the stats in this game, Glenn? What do you got for us?
Yeah, I want to start with the Buffalo Bills. Definitely a high-powered offense. They come into this game as the league's number 2 overall offense. And I'm going to start with the passing attack because that is their bread and butter. So far this season, they've thrown for 2,600. Actually, no, I'm going to get there. I'm just going to get Josh Allen's stats. We don't need to see what Matt Barkley did in cleanup time or any of that. So I'm just going to go right to Josh Allen. He completed his passes at a 69.2 completion percentage. Quite impressive. Threw for 4,544 yards and then 37 touchdowns, Jimbo, to just 10 interceptions. Really, really impressive throwing numbers there. Increasing his completion percentage and his touchdowns by that much from when we're going to get into exactly how much he did increase both those areas. It was really impressive. As far as on the ground, I'm going to talk about some of the key players they have. Devin Singletary is their last. He's their number one back, clear cut now that Zach Moss is out, which was obviously disappointing for I'm sure being a Utah graduate. We were both fans of Zach Moss coming out. Disappointed to see him gone. So Devin Singletary is definitely the lead back. And on the season, he has 687 rushing yards, just 2 touchdowns, but has also caught the ball 38 times out of the backfield for 269 yards. And then backing him up, I'm assuming, is going to be TJ Yeldon. But I'm not really sure because he hasn't had a lot of work this year. Now, as far as pass catching, we know they got some guys that can catch the ball.
Now, really quickly, though, they did pick up Devontae Freeman as well.
Oh, true. Yes, we did. We discussed that in our last show.
Yeah.
And look, he played okay for the Giants earlier this year. Better than I was expecting when he was first signed. of course, after the Saquon injury. So yeah, I mean, it makes you wonder how much he can, with the quarantine process of adding to a team, how much he's been able to practice with the team. But nonetheless, he is a vet, and he definitely could help back up Devin Singletary. Now, Stephon Diggs, he's the highlight real player. He's their true number one receiver. There's no doubt about it. He had 166 targets this year, Jimbo. 166. I got to imagine. I don't have it in front of me. That might be double what anybody on our team got. But he turned that into 127 catches, which led the league, for 1,535 yards, which also led the league, and 8 touchdowns. So he certainly took advantage of that heavy workload and the amount of targets he got. And then Cole Beasley, second on the team in targets with 107. He turned that into 82 catches, Jimbo. Almost got 1,000 yards himself at 967 and 4 touchdowns. And then we all remember John Brown, Smoke, as we called him here in Baltimore. He had 33 catches for 458 yards and 3 touchdowns on the year. And also I want to talk about this young man, Gabriel Davis. This guy, I hadn't heard of him. I mean, he's a rookie, I believe. He's only 21 years old. He had 35 catches for 599 yards, but more importantly, 7 receiving touchdowns on the year. So behind Diggs, he's their second leading scorer from a receiving standpoint. So they got a lot of guys, Jimmy, that they like to throw the ball around to. So this passing attack is quite formidable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's being quite bashful, right? I think that they are dangerous, right?
And I was wrong about, I'll be honest. I got to fess up. If Bills Mafia is listening, Raven Nation, I was wrong about the Diggs addition. I thought the way he, ended in Minnesota, I didn't like his attitude. I didn't like seeing him arguing and fussing about not getting the ball, or, when his team was winning a playoff game. I didn't like the look of that, and I thought maybe he'd be a little unhappy in the cold weather and all that stuff, and sharing targets with John Brown and Cole. I was wrong, Jimmy. That man is a bona fide number one, and he is a big reason, I'm sure, that Josh Allen saw such an increase in his statistics.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought they gave up a lot in that pickup as well. Especially when you look at what the Texans got back for DeAndre Hopkins. But
I think that's more of a reflection on the Texans.
Than it is on the. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It has worked out perfectly for them. But what we want to do now, before we continue to get into some questions and concerns, is talk about our challenge of the week. Glenn, I'm excited to talk about this. I want you to go ahead and let our viewers know what we're going to be doing for this divisional matchup for our challenge of the week. And before you do, for those of you who don't know, the winner of our challenge, of course, gets a shout out on the show. And so that's what we have at stake. Not only that, but bragging rights. But Glenn, what is our challenge of the week?
Yeah, it's tough to come up with a new one each and every week, but I thought this one was pretty fun. We know that this team, the Baltimore Ravens, likes to run the ball. They do it at an all-time rate. So our challenge this week is to guess the total rushing yard total for this game for just the Baltimore Ravens. So that includes anyone who touches the ball. Our total rushing yards for the game, whoever guesses closest to the correct number will win the challenge and will, as Jimmy said, get a shout out on the show. And they're coming for you, Daniel. They're coming for your title. Okay, it's been a couple weeks since Daniel has, won a challenge, and he's leaving the door open for you guys to take over his reign as the champion right now. So please get your guesses in the comment section, and we'll certainly announce the winner.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're saying there's a chance is what I'm hearing, Glenn.
Yeah, it looks like there's only going to be one winner. Some of our contests, there can be multiple winners, but this one, unless 2 people guess the exact same number that happens to be the closest, I think we're only have one winner. So there's a window here for someone to slide up the ranks.
Absolutely. So make sure you guys put your guesses down in the comment section. And like Glenn said, we'll be sure to give you guys a shout out. But let's move to the offensive side of the ball and get into some questions and concerns. The offensive side of the ball for the Ravens, that is. Obviously, the Bills are weak on the perimeter of their defense. And in general against the run game. I mean, missing another Utah guy in Star Lotulelei, that big guy up the middle. They have some smaller guys up front now. How do you see the Ravens taking advantage of that Glenn, I'm interested to get your take on that. And then also I want you to answer this. Is there anything, because I think I already know what you're going to say in your answer, but really what I want to know is, other than the obvious ways that we're going to take advantage of their weaknesses in the run game, is there anything out of the ordinary that you can see them doing that maybe, isn't being talked about as much?
Well, I don't know if it's out of the ordinary because I think we just saw it last week, but I don't know if it's being talked about enough. I think we saw Greg Roman on the offense was struggling to get to the outside, to get to the edges in the run game last week in the first half. And what they did in the third quarter is they used the short passing game as an extension of the run game. And I think that's something we could look for the Ravens to do this week if that struggle exists. Because look, they got speed on the defensive front as well as on the back end with their safeties. They got two talented safeties. They got Tremont Edmonds, you mentioned, is a blur at middle linebacker. They got athleticism and they got speed. So if the Ravens are struggling to get to the edges, which you mentioned, I'm not sure if you mentioned it before the call, Jimmy, or before this video, their weaknesses when it comes to teams getting to the running off the left side, that left tackle. They get hurt there. So I'm sure that the Bills are looking to seal that up. Well, if they do, then I think the Ravens will then turn to that short passing game that we saw hitting Ricard out of the backfield, hitting Hollywood Brown on those quick hitches and letting him use his speed and athleticism to pick up maybe 6 to 8 yards. Using that extension of that short passing game as an extension of the run, I think is really a way that the Ravens just get guys in space and get guys to the edges. And so I think that they'll definitely use some of that they used last week. What do you think?
Now, what about the one thing I think that maybe, at least for Ravens folks, now nationally, I wouldn't expect them to talk about this, but for Ravens folks, the one thing I haven't been hearing is, what about the use of a guy like Duvernay in a sweep type situation? I think that we could see that more than once. And then once, maybe we do that once or twice, starting to use that as a decoy. I could definitely see that happen. But this is the other thing too, because everyone knows we're going to attack the outsides. I think obviously that will happen, but I don't want to think that we're only going to run on the outsides. I think Gus is going to eat up the middle. I really do. Their defense up the gut isn't anything to write home about either. So I don't think it's going to be all about pushing the perimeter. I think it's going to be a balance, strictly running the ball between both and then striking on the outside when we can. But I think Gus is going to have one heck of a game, and I'll get into that later. But I got another one for you, and this is a fun one. The secondary of their defense is pretty good. Carlos Hyde and Tre'Davious White are
Micah Hyde.
Or sorry, geez, Whiz. Carlos Hyde. Oh gosh,
that's the old running back.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I got fantasy on the mind. That's why.
That's right.
Micah Hyde and Tre'Davious White, and then who's the other safety they got?
Jordan Poyer's no joke.
Yeah. Right, absolutely. They're all good players. So in the last game against the Titans, we were able to depend on Hollywood against that Titans secondary, and he had a good game. But will we be able to depend on him as much in this game, and will we have to, in your estimation?
I do think to answer the latter of the two questions, I do think we need to have Hollywood have a good game. I mean, look, he adds the element to the outside that nobody else has really on this team, and that's that. For some reason, Lamar Jackson. I mean, I guess the reason is they're really good friends off the field and very close, but it just seems like he looks at Hollywood first, him and Andrews, and then everyone else is a distant third. Whether that's by design from the offense or just like, as I mentioned, their camaraderie and their closeness off the field. But whatever he relies on Hollywood, man. He relies on Hollywood and Mark Andrews to move the ball down the field. So I think if they're able to completely take Hollywood away, that wouldn't be no good for the Ravens offense. He adds a lot. Now, look, I mean, I know that we have speed elsewhere, just Duvernay and I don't know if we'll even see Prochet this game, but my point is, I think that the way the Ravens have used Hollywood has shown that he's important to this team, man. I think that if we could hit on some more of those, I mean, we're just missing on some of these big shots down the field could really open up the field even more than it already has. But yeah, the role he plays is vital, and I don't see if he comes out and has a really poor game, I think the Ravens are going to struggle.
Yeah, I think that for us to make this run and come out victorious with a Lombardi, I think that we will absolutely need to depend on Hollywood. But I think for this game specifically, I think between our rushing attack and their inability to defend the middle of the field, I think that Mark Andrews, as far as our passing game goes, in this game specifically, might be sufficient, even if Hollywood does have a drop off, with a guy like Tre'Davious, whether he's going to follow him or what. But if Hollywood doesn't have quite the game, I think that in this game specifically, we'll be all right.
Well, let me ask you one quick follow up to that. If they are able to take Hollywood away, do you feel confident in those other outside guys to do just enough to pick up that slack?
Yeah, it's funny to me because if that was a concern for me in the Titans game, I don't know how they're going to stop our rushing attack and I don't know how they're going to force us to push the ball to the outside.
Right.
I don't. And this is interesting because that leads right into our next question here, Glenn. So, do you have any concerns about what I'll call like a Greg Roman moment, right? Where he's kind of overcomplicating things? Or do you think one of the things I think is that he's grown this year as a coordinator? So any concern around him seeing on paper, okay, they suck against what we're good at, but we're going to trick them. We're going to go out there and attack their strengths and throw on first, second, and third down in the first drive of the game. Like, is there any concern around that happening?
Man, well, I think that, he said it multiple times this year in press conferences that necessity is the mother of invention, right? So I think that just because of necessity through injuries and how the roster was constructed, he's learned throughout this season that, this is just who we are. And that's what makes us good is the running the ball, play action off the run, and hopefully hit some deep balls and some big plays down the field. And then when all else fails, Lamar, bail us out. But I see what you mean. I don't want to see him come out, throw, punt. I don't want to see throw, punt. That would drive me absolutely crazy. But at the same time, Jimbo, don't you often feel like if it works, you're a genius, and if it doesn't, you're the village idiot, like my dad always likes to say? Because if they're hitting on those plays, because look, there's no question that the Bills know what we do best. I mean, there's no better team in the history of the league at running the ball than the Ravens. So they're going to do a lot of the same thing the Titans did. They're going to bring both their safeties down the box, and they're going to challenge the outside receivers to make plays against likely one-on-one coverage against Pro Bowl type corners and safeties. So my whole thing is you have to make them pay at some point through the air to make them respect you and to back them off a little bit. So I understand why he throws. I get it. I just wish we could execute better and make the decision look a little bit, better, because I mean, look, that Boykin throw early in the game last week would have looked great if it was to the sideline where it should have been and a little earlier when it should have been. And maybe he would have had a chance at it, but instead it's late and it's way off target and it's a pick and it looks like, gosh, why are you doing it? So it's kind of a balance. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I'll say this, and you spoke this before, is that my frustration is not solely the early in the game. We're trying to establish a pace and control the clock, and we're throwing it, even though we know how we win. That is not my only frustration. My other frustration is that when we're running the ball, we're not allowing our running backs to do their jobs, because we're doing these design runs for Lamar Jackson, it seems like, earlier in the game more than later, where I feel as though even if the defense, for example, in the Titans game early on, even if their defense was absolutely prepared for what we were going to be doing and running the ball, I still think we get 3 yards, or 3 and 4. We end up in a 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, which is manageable instead of a 3rd and 7, 3rd and 9. And Lamar's got to, pull up a rabbit out of his hat. Right. Yep. I think to add on to what you're saying, we need to get the ball to our backs earlier in the game.
Yeah.
I think that's something you touched on.
And some of that's on Lamar as well, because there was a couple of occasions in the beginning of that Titans game where I feel he made the wrong read and pulled it out of the belly of the running back and took it himself and wasn't able to get much with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that could have been have to do with, like, this game was pretty personal for him. And maybe we'll see less of that coming up.
Let me ask you something real quick.
Go ahead.
You've been asking me all the questions. Let me put let me put the fire under your feet a little bit. We saw Ricard be used a lot, and I mentioned earlier in the show that he was used a lot in the passing game. Do you see him doing that again this week?
Yeah, I do. I do. I think that between that and the short passes to Hollywood and the runs to Duvernay, I think that's our version of getting the ball to the outside when we need to. Mm-hmm. I just think that's what it's going to be, and pushing the outside. So yeah, I think we get him the ball. I hope. My only concern is that sometimes I get nervous when he catches it when it comes to ball security. I get a little nervous that some guy's just going to pop it out.
But he hasn't thus far. The only time he's lost it has been during the exchange of a handoff, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, that was terrible.
Yeah.
But
but
no,
he's got hands, man.
Yeah,
He's a 310-pounder that has hands.
Yeah, it's incredible. But I do see it happening. I think that, as weird as it sounds, only the Ravens would consider pushing the perimeter of a defense, putting pressure on the perimeter of defense with a 311-pound fullback in the passing game. Like, only the Baltimore Ravens would do that, right?
Yep.
So
not many teams have a 310-pound athlete like Ricard, and it's good. It's good to see. I'm seeing more national coverage. Finally giving Pat Ricard the respect for just being the incredible athlete that this guy was, being obviously a D tackle coming out of Maine who was undrafted, now being a Pro Bowl and probably the best fullback in the game. Him and Juszczyk is really the only discussion. So, but the other question I have is about Mark Andrews. We know about his importance to this offense, certainly being our number one red zone threat, in my opinion. But his snap count was down a little bit last week against the Titans. I'm not sure if that was design, injury, or just kind of game circumstance. But the Bills have shown that they can struggle covering the tight end in the middle of the field this season. So how do you envision them using Andrews and attacking the middle of the field in general?
This game, I think that Mark Andrews is going to be our offensive player of the game at the end of it. Now, I'm not picking him in my.
Hold on. I went right down and I looked. I went right down. I said, "Who is he picking?"
So let me alter my statement. I think in the passing game, to this game is all about Mark. I think he comes out with something like 8 catches, close to 90 yards, maybe more, but a touchdown, maybe 2. So I think that Mark is going to make them pay in this game, certainly. I think this will be a big game for him. So I think last week it was just like a personnel thing. I don't think it was lack of production or trust or anything like that, because Mark
I just didn't know if it was an injury or something like that too.
Yeah. What do you think? How do you envision Mark doing in this game?
I mean, I hope, like I mentioned before, they got good linebackers. They got good safeties. Typically those are the two positions tasked with guarding and covering tight ends. So it's puzzling as to how that they've struggled in those areas. And it may just be due to them playing a lot of aggressive, defensive sets and sending a lot of pressure, and then they expose the middle of the field. But look, I mean, if the thing about Edmonds is he's super fast, but I mean, Mark Andrews is so savvy. He's so good at using his body and deceiving the defender during his route that I just find it hard, to imagine many linebackers having success, even if you are naturally faster than him, which there's no doubt Edmonds is. I'm super confident. I mean, we're both pretty confident on Andrews. So I think he'll have a really good game. But look, I mean, they're good safeties, and there's some good linebackers over there. So I wouldn't be stunned if they limit him a little bit.
Yeah, I can see there, but I think I'm going to be pretty shocked if he comes out and has a below average game. I think I'm going to be pretty surprised. So this one is kind of a little bit of a I'm throwing what's the phrase? I'm throwing I'm throwing a monkey wrench into it or something like that. How's it go? You know what I'm talking about? Anyway, I'm changing it up on you. All right.
Oh, okay.
Okay. That's what we're doing. We're going to do over under. We talked about the challenge for this week is total rushing yards. And I guess we ought to give our guesses, right? Yeah. With the challenge. Yeah. But before we do that, let's give our over under. I've set it at 230.
That's an insane. The fact that you can set an over under at 230 rushing yards and it's even it's a debate that we go over is insane.
Well, I'll tell you this right now. You already know which way I'm going, because if it were 300, I'm taking the over.
Oh my goodness.
Where are you going?
So what is your prediction? You got to give me more than that.
Yeah, I'm going 323.
Wow. I'm writing it down, Jimbo.
323. Yep.
Wow. That is insane. Because, I mean, to get to that level of rushing, you got to have, first of all, you got to be in the game the entire game. You got to have actually a pretty good level of success during that game. So you're saying, okay, all right, well, I think it's going to be over 230. I don't know if it's going to get quite to 323. My prediction will be, I'm going to say 245. Okay. I think last week ran to 236, I believe their total was. So I do think they go over the 230 mark again, but I'm going to say 245, be a little more modest than you, not quite as bullish on our rush attack. But yeah, I hope you're right. And I hope I'm wrong, but switching over to the defensive side of the ball, the one thing that when I look at the stats for the Buffalo Bills, it has me concerned, is that they were first in the league in first downs this year. Last year, the Ravens were first in the league in first downs, and we talked about the cheat code that the Ravens offense was on third down led by Lamar. I feel like third down and red zone are the two biggest areas a lot of times that an offense should be graded upon. You know, how they perform on third down, how they perform in the red zone. Well, they must be, I mean, they got to be pretty darn good to be number one in the league in first down. So when you hear that they can move the chains better than anyone in the league this year, that's got to make you a little worried, right, Jimbo?
It makes me a little worried, but I think that their butts are going to be frozen in them seats, the bench. I just think that we're going to dominate time of possession, and this just plays into our hands. I mean, if you're talking about defensively, I won't keep talking about our offensive side of the ball. Yeah, it concerns me, but I'll tell you what, man, it makes all the difference in the world having all three corners healthy and back. All the difference in the world. Expect, with Jimmy being back there. But the one thing I'll say is I really think that their offensive strengths play into our game plan. I just think this is a bad matchup for them. So what I mean by that is our offense being on the field so much is going to affect their offense.
Yeah.
And so I think that'll be how we
huddled by the heaters, Jimbo.
Oh, big time for sure. Now this is something that I want to spend some time on here. Josh Allen, of course, is incredible against the blitz. He showed that by leading the league in passing touchdowns against the blitz with 19. He's fantastic against the Colts, 6 for 8, throwing 2 touchdowns at QBR of 98.5 when they brought the heat. So nobody, of course, blitzes more than us.
Yeah.
Does that concern you?
Yes. Yes, it does, Jimbo. I have flashbacks to the Kansas City game. I know this is not the Kansas City Chiefs we're playing, but you can see some similarities in their roster and how they play. And certainly Josh Allen and Mahomes are two of the best against the blitz in the league. And whenever we blitzed, he caught us. And I'm worried that this will happen again. I mean, this guy, Josh Allen's been fantastic all year against the blitz. So it's not even like it would be outside the norm for him to dissect that type of offense, type of defense. But also, I mean, look, if you're gonna blitz him, and you're gonna get your hands on him, you got to bring him down, because that's what worries me is him extending the play, getting outside the pocket, because when he does that, I mean, he's fantastic. I mentioned some of the numbers. I don't have them in front of me right now, but him throwing on the run this year has also been fantastic. So I think it's a really an interesting balance they have to do, because I do think you need to influence him with pass rush. There's just no doubt about it. But it's confusing him. It's bringing pass rush from every different angle. It's having multiple guys lined up and then having some drop into coverage and others, go. It's all about, to me, about when you do blitz, confuse him. Don't make it obvious who's coming, who's dropping. It's all about how you blitz, because I think you still have to. I mean, you got to influence this guy and make him move his feet. If he's able to sit in the pocket all day, Jimmy, it's going to be awfully hard to cover those guys on the outside.
Yeah, and I think this is exactly why we went out and got a guy like Ngakoue, where, we might not have to bring extra men every single time to generate some pressure. You still got a guy like Calais Campbell. You got a guy like Matt Judon. You got a guy like Yannick Ngakoue and Derek Wolfe, Brandon Wood, those guys.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Pernell McPhee, even Tyus Bowser. So we got bodies. We got quality to above average pass rushers there that without bringing extra men every time can still get there. But there's something that I want to draw a comparison here and get into my next question. It has to do with the one you just talked about. It's really about Wink and whether or not he's going to stay true to his roots and blitz, where Josh is torching people, but his numbers are much more closer to to average when it comes to playing against the zone. So, my theory is that Josh Allen, great shooters, if you make him, sometimes if you ever see a game where you give a great shooter too much space and he has too much time to think about it and he misses the shot, right? But if it's just a reactionary catch and shoot, he's going to drill it every time. So I wonder if there's any truth to a similar idea to where, okay, we don't bring heavy pressure, but we kind of mix up we give him some exotic looks in the zone and move things around, like you said, kind of confuse him and make him think a little bit, 1 second, 2 second, one extra hitch, one extra step. And maybe he does throw a pick or two. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, kind of get him out of this rhythm. So my question to you is, do you think Wink does go to the zone, or do you think he just stays tried and true to what he's known for?
I think he'll definitely sprinkle in the zone. We heard quarterbacks down the stretch. I think it was Baker I can't remember, but there was a couple quarterbacks that were mentioning when asked after the game, did they do anything that was unexpected? Did they do something you didn't see on tape this year? And at least two, I remember saying, yeah, they played more zone than we were expecting. So it's something that Wink has already been incorporating down the stretch on this defense is mixing in those zone coverages. And I'm sure he's done it, but it just seems like more often lately he's been doing it and getting out of his bread and butter. But I mean, look, we got a bunch of guys that are man cover guys. I mean, you know, Marcus Peters could play zone. He could play, but same with Humphrey and all these guys. But their main bread and butter is their man coverage. I mean, that's what they do best. And that's why they're here and getting paid all the money that they are, because it's hard to find good man cover corners. It's just not easy. And so I do think he'll definitely still stick with a lot of those same concepts and bring those man blitzes. But I think if you sprinkle in enough of the zones and zone blitzes and then drop, only rush 4 sometimes, rush 5, rush 6 other times, as long as you keep him confused and he doesn't know what's coming, I think that's the main important thing is just keep Josh Allen guessing and just don't let him be able to pick it out pre-play, before the snap. And then if he identifies the blitz before the snap, then you could be in trouble.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. So let's talk about a couple other things before we get our keys to the game. One of my concerns defensively for us, while I'm feeling quite confident about this game in general, I'm a little nervous about their vaunted passing attack against a guy like Patrick Queen who struggled in coverage. And are you as concerned as I am, or you feel like, I mean, they did a decent job in the second half covering up against the Titans with Jimmy? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think, Fort also played a big role in that. He comes in, he was fantastic at bottling up certainly Henry in the flat, and we saw Chris Board, Malik Harrison even. The one area that has me a little concerned is running after the catch. The Ravens did a fantastic job last week at tackling the receivers and the running back, obviously Derrick Henry, and not letting yards after contact or yards after catch. But the one time I did see it happen was when Ferkster, the tight end, went across the middle of the field on third down, and we saw Patrick Queen kind of in no man's land, not doing a whole lot. And that was really the only time I saw a big yards after catch. He turned a quick slant into a first down and I think like 15 or 20-yard gain. So, yeah, it's a little worrisome. But you mentioned earlier the depth that this front seven has, and I think that's important from a pass rush standpoint, but also a coverage standpoint. I mean, they can throw multiple linebackers out there. They can play safeties in the linebacker position with Levine, with Jimmy Smith will take on a tight end. I think just the amount of numbers, the amount of good quality depth that they have in Baltimore, they'll find an answer. But yeah, I mean, if they catch Patrick Queen, one-on-one in the middle, and he, isn't disciplined with his eyes, I could see a situation where they definitely pick up some yardage there.
Yeah, and the last thing I want to touch on before we kind of move into the next segment of the show is the Bills wide receivers versus the corners. And we've talked about this a little bit, but I want you to kind of give me your breakdown, Glenn. I mean, so before I dish it over to you, I think that Jimmy in his presser talked about getting his hands on these guys early. I think that we're up for the task. I think that John is a below average in size, right? Cole Beasley, super shifty, below average in size. Diggs, super quick, a little bit bigger than those two, but incredibly quick. I think that those three against our three corners, as explosive as Diggs has been, I'm going to put money on our corners' ability to throw off the rhythm of those guys at the line. Diggs is not a guy known for loving physical contact. He's not, a physically imposing
Hey, he's
guy.
a Terp. You watch your mouth.
Well, he's not. Yeah, you're right, but he's not a physically imposing receiver. That's not how he makes his money. He makes his money off being quick and deceptive, having incredible hands. No discredit there. But I think that Jimmy and Marlon can get up under some of these guys and really throw some things off and win the battle. So that's how I see it going. Apparently, I'm extremely confident about this game. I'm realizing as the show's
you're usually
going
pretty confident, though. I mean,
so tell me how you feel.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing is you mentioned it, the fact that they got healthy finally. I mean, now it's a little. I don't love seeing Marcus Peters missing practice, but I anticipate he'll be out there come Saturday night. And what it does is it just allows so much flexibility from Wink on the back end. So we saw it last week. We saw AJ Brown come out and really dominate in the first quarter and kind of push around Marlon Humphrey, who's just not used. We're not used to seeing him get pushed around. And what Wink was able to do was then go to a guy like Jimmy Smith, who was, the 8th best corner in the league rated by PFF this year. And now, I think 13-year vet or 11-year vet. The guy's been around, seen it all. He's our most physically imposing corner. They could throw him on him for a few plays and make sure, you're not, you don't want Jimmy on him for all the plays, but you put him in situations where he's fresh. He feels good. He can go out there and play a few plays, give Marlon a little breather, let him play on a less targeted receiver, get his swagger back, if you will, get a little confidence back, then put him back, sprinkle him back, then put him back on AJ Brown after he's kind of, because we talked about bouncing back and nobody needs to bounce back more than a corner who gives up a big play. There's just no doubt about it. So to me, that's the big key. I mean, it's the fact that with Jimmy back, with the development of Averett and the addition of Tramon Williams, they develop such depth back there that's quality. And as long as they can bounce back, because look, they're going to give up big plays, Jimmy. They're going to give up first downs. We saw it last week. But the big thing is, can they bounce back? They did it last week. I mean, you look at AJ Brown's first half numbers to second half numbers, big difference, So I think that if they can continue to use that flexibility that they have on the back end and bounce back when they do give up big plays, because we know they're coming, I think they'll be okay. But look, this is going to be one of the most challenging games of the season, no doubt about it, for those corners.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you 100%. So let's get right into our keys to the game. And stay on we'll go back to the offensive side of the ball. I'm going to give you mine first. Is stick with what works, even if they know it's coming. At the end of the day, I know Greg Roman likes to be deceptive and all these things, but I think that we have the horses to get the job done in the rushing attack, even when they know it's coming. I think sometimes it's just a matter of personnel, and I don't think they have it defensively. I just think it's that simple. It's a humbling experience to be on the losing end of that, but it is what it is. All these guys are grown men, and I just think that's how it's going to go. So stick with what works, even if they know it's coming, because look, it's like Novocaine, right? Give it time, it works every time. Give it time, works every time. So
every time.
Go ahead.
To me, it's going to be important, especially early on, to sustain drives. If they come out slow and they 3-and-out the first couple drives and allow the Buffalo Bills offense to go down the field and get up, and not only get up on the scoreboard, but now, in the second half, that defense starts to get tired because we don't need to see that. We need to see Josh Allen on the sideline, huddling up next to that heater, darn near burning his helmet just to keep it warm enough, because the Ravens are just eating up the time of possession, 7-8 minute touchdown drives. I do not want to see 3-and-outs or 1 first down and punt early on, because then it could lead to a very, very long second half for this defense. And I'll just stay on and give you my defensive one, because it's pretty quick. It's the same as it was last week. And it was maybe the reason they won last week, Jimbo. Their tackling was absolutely special last week. Nobody, it seemed like, could break a tackle from the Ravens. And every time they caught the ball, boom, they were tackled and stopped right in their tracks right there. That's what we need to see this week. We cannot see yards after catch and yards after first contact. And that includes Josh Allen, their big quarterback, who in the red zone will look to run somebody over if he has the size advantage. And usually he does, because he is a big boy. So, tackling is going to be the utmost importance. What about you?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I'll just go back to what I said about the corners. I think that getting physical with their receivers and throwing off some of their rhythm stuff is going to be important. Doing that early, doing it often, and adding to that, like you said, putting fresh bodies on Diggs is my key defensively. So exciting part here, Glenn. We'll get into our big game predictions and our scores. So I'm gonna allow you the opportunity to provide us with your first. I'll let you go first here. Your defensive big game player prediction.
Yeah, you mentioned it a few minutes ago, and Ngakoue is my guy this week. I think that Yannick uses that incredible speed and tracks down a Josh Allen who's used to running away from defensive ends and outside linebackers. But I think he's going to learn you can't do so against Yannick, and he tracks him down for a couple sacks. Yannick, 2 sacks this week. What do you got?
Nice. I'm going with Tyus Bowser. I think that he's going to get an interception in this game. I think that we're going to get a little exotic, as Wink often does, with our pressures and guys dropping out, and then with the zones, and we're going to confuse Allen at least a couple times this game, but once, to where he's not going to see Tyus. Tyus is going to be right there and make the grab. Now, offensively. Nice. I know I mentioned Mark Andrews, but earlier in the show, I said Gus is going to eat, because everybody knows that we're going to push the perimeters and put a lot of pressure on it. I think Gus is going to make Ed Oliver remember who he is in this game, and all those other guys that play in the interior of that defense, because I think he's going to pound the rock in this game. I'm going 80 plus and a touchdown.
Wow.
Gus Edwards balls out in this game.
Wow, I like it. Well, I got to go with Hollywood. I think as much as attention that they're going to pay on him on the outside with guys like Tre'Davious White, I think he's just too important, and Greg Roman will find the way to get the ball in his hands. So I think he gets another touchdown this week, continues the good streak he's been on really since Lamar returned from COVID. And I think he gets in the end zone. As far as my score, I think it's going to be a close one, Jimmy. I think it's going to start a little slow, but then really heat up in the second half. I think the Ravens win a tight one, 31-30. What do you got?
All right, so mine isn't going to be quite as close. I think the Ravens actually will jump out to a lead, and then I think that the Bills will try and make their way back. I think the game ends up being 38-34. I think Tuck seals it and gives us a little bit of breathing room, and I think the Ravens pull it off and go on to the AFC Championship game.
Man, well, I certainly hope you're right about that last part. But let us know what you guys think. Who's your big game performer? What's your score prediction? And don't forget about our weekly challenge to give us the closest person to the total rushing yards by the Baltimore Ravens will get a shout out on the show. And we'll talk to you guys soon.
See ya.